Britain in the early 18th century was a nation on the edge of unprecedented transformation. Fields stretched across the countryside, dotted with small villages where families lived, much as their ancestors had for generations. Life moved slowly, guided by the rhythm of agriculture. Tools were simple, production was limited, and most households relied on manual labor. Small workshops, cottages, and local artisans produced goods in limited quantities. Wool spinning, weaving, and pottery were done by hand, often inside homes. Transportation depended on horses, muddy roads, and slow river barges. The concept of mass production was almost unimaginable. Yet beneath this familiar surface, change was forming silently, shaped by population growth, trade expansion, scientific curiosity, and Britain's unique economic climate. Merchants sought faster and cheaper ways to produce goods. Demand for clothing, metalwork, and manufactured items surged dramatically as the population increased. Britain's growing middle class, enriched by global trade and colonial expansion, desired more products at affordable prices. Overseas markets demanded textiles, tools, and manufactured goods in quantities that cottage industries could no longer supply. Britain's access to coal and iron ignited new possibilities. Entrepreneurs, investors, and inventors recognized the opportunity to reshape production. At the same time, Enlightenment ideas encouraged experimentation and scientific thinking, creating an environment where innovation became not only possible but essential. Coal became the foundation. Vast coal deposits across Britain provided a cheap and powerful energy source. Mines expanded, though at great physical risk to workers. As surface coal depleted, deeper mines required new solutions to combat flooding. This need accelerated mechanical innovation. Steam power, still primitive, held promise, but machines were unreliable until engineers refined them. Thomas Newcomen's steam pump offered partial relief, lifting water from mines, but efficiency remained low. Inventors continued improving the design. The quest to optimize coal, metals, and machinery shaped the early foundations of industrialization. Iron also played a critical role. Traditional iron-making relied on charcoal, but timber shortages pushed Britain toward coke-based smelting. Abraham Darby's innovations in the early 18th century revolutionized iron production. Coke allowed furnaces to reach higher temperatures, creating stronger and cheaper iron. This new iron became the backbone of machines, tools, and infrastructure. The synergy between coal and iron created a cycle of innovation. Better furnaces produced better machines, and better machines improved mining, which then fed more production. The textile industry formed the first industrial battlefield. Hand spinning and weaving could not meet increasing demand. Cloth merchants complained of shortages, delays, and high costs. Inventors saw opportunity. James Hargreaves created the spinning jenny, allowing a single worker to spin multiple threads simultaneously. Richard Arkwright's water frame brought power-driven spinning into factories, accelerating production. Samuel Crompton's spinning mule combined earlier inventions, producing fine, high-quality thread previously impossible at scale. These machines shifted manufacturing from homes to large buildings powered by water wheels. The factory system emerged, reorganizing labor and redefining economic life. Workers adapted to scheduled hours, new routines, and hierarchical oversight. Children and women joined the workforce due to their small hands and lower wages, shaping a controversial but central aspect of early industrial labor. Transportation soon became a bottleneck. Moving coal, iron, and textiles across Britain required reliable infrastructure. Existing roads were inadequate for increasing trade. Turnpike trusts improved routes by charging tolls, enabling smoother travel. Canals brought a revolution of their own. Engineers carved channels across the landscape, linking mines, factories, and ports. The Bridgewater Canal, financed by the Duke of Bridgewater and engineered by James Brindley, dramatically lowered coal transport costs. Canals spread quickly, creating a network that supported heavy freight movement. Transport innovation accelerated Britain's industrial momentum, turning isolated regions into connected economic hubs. Factories multiplied. Urban centers expanded rapidly as rural families migrated in search of work. Towns like Manchester, Birmingham, and Leeds transformed into industrial strongholds. Chimneys filled the sky, machinery echoed through the streets, and the pace of life accelerated. Economic opportunities grew, but so did hardship. Overcrowded housing, unsanitary conditions, and long working hours created new social challenges. The Industrial Revolution delivered prosperity for investors and manufacturers, but also birthed inequality, poverty, and harsh labor environments for millions of workers. This contrast defined the early industrial era, revealing both the promise and cost of progress. Meanwhile, Britain's economic policies strengthened industrial growth. Intellectual property laws protected inventors, enabling profits from new machines. Banks and financial institutions expanded credit access, supporting factories, mining operations, and large-scale engineering projects. Britain's global empire provided raw materials and vast markets for finished goods. Naval dominance ensured trade routes remained secure, allowing manufactured items to flow worldwide. These factors, Material resources, financial support, innovation culture, and global reach combined uniquely to place Britain at the forefront of industrial transformation. Scientific societies and engineering networks spread knowledge among inventors and businessmen. Ideas circulated quickly through meetings, journals, and personal correspondence. From chemistry to mechanics, breakthroughs inspired further experimentation. Industry and science merged into a powerful engine of development. No single invention triggered the revolution. Rather, countless small steps created a chain reaction. Each improvement made the next possible. Britain became a nation of experimenters, entrepreneurs, and industrial pioneers. By the late 18th century, steam power reached its turning point. James Watt refined the steam engine with remarkable precision, introducing separate condensers, improved efficiency, and new applications. Factories no longer relied solely on water. Steam engines powered machinery, pumps, mills, and later locomotives. Manufacturers were free to build factories away from rivers, expanding industrial territory. Steam transformed production capacity, accelerating output beyond anything previously imagined. Combined with iron machinery and advanced textile technology, steam became the force that pushed Britain into the center of global progress. Economic growth soared, exports increased dramatically, wages fluctuated, and wealth accumulated unevenly but undeniably. Britain's industrial economy became the model and envy of the world. Other nations observed the transformation but struggled to replicate it quickly. Britain guarded its industrial secrets, limiting skilled workers from emigrating and protecting machine designs. Yet curiosity and ambition abroad ensured that industrial ideas would eventually spread far beyond Britain. The Industrial Revolution reshaped society at every level. Daily life changed as people shifted from home-based work to factory schedules. Urban environments grew and strained under population pressure. Class distinctions sharpened between factory owners and laborers. The concept of childhood changed as work replaced education for many. The environment suffered as coal smoke darkened cities and rivers absorbed industrial waste. Alongside these challenges, technological progress offered new possibilities. Mass production lowered the cost of goods, improving access to clothing, tools, and household items. Innovations in science, engineering, and medicine emerged from the same spirit of experimentation that fueled industrial growth. Britain's transformation was far from complete. The first wave of industrialization laid the foundation for deeper, more profound changes that would unfold across the 19th century. As machines grew more powerful, transportation faster, and cities larger, Britain would continue its journey into a new economic age. The developments of these early decades set the stage for further breakthroughs that would redefine global power, economic structure, and human experience. This is the beginning of a story that reshaped the world, built on coal, steam, iron, and the ingenuity of a society ready to change everything. As the 18th century progressed, Britain entered a period of transformation unlike anything the world had witnessed before. The landscape of daily life began to shift as new machines, new systems of work, and new patterns of production emerged across the country. Towns that had once been modest market centers grew rapidly into industrial hubs, drawing people from rural villages in search of opportunity, wages, and stability. Britain's population rose sharply, adding both pressure and potential to the evolving economy. Central to this transformation was the textile industry. For generations, spinning and weaving had been household activities, performed slowly and by hand. But inventions such as the flying shuttle, spinning jenny, water frame, and later the mule set in motion a chain reaction that accelerated production beyond anything previously imaginable. Mills began to rise along rivers that powered their machines, their massive water wheels turning ceaselessly as they fed the growing demand for cotton cloth. For the first time, labor was concentrated under one roof, working to the rhythm of machinery rather than the pace of human hands. As cotton became the backbone of Britain's industrial growth, changes rippled outward. Machines required energy, and energy required innovation. Coal, once used primarily for heating, became the vital fuel of the new era. Mines expanded deeper into the earth, producing a resource that would power steam engines, factories, and transportation networks. Steam, in particular, revolutionized the way industries functioned. James Watt, A&S improvements to the steam engine created a reliable and adaptable power source capable of driving machinery far from rivers. Mills were no longer bound to waterways. They could rise wherever labor and capital came together. The increasing demand for coal transformed mining towns into bustling centers of activity, but it also brought hardship. Miners faced dangerous conditions, toxic gases, frequent cave-ins, and long hours underground. Children were employed to haul coal through narrow tunnels. Women worked at the surface sorting ore. The new industrial economy provided wages, but demanded a steep cost in health and safety. Despite this, the growing coal supply fed the engines of industrial expansion, powering machines that reshaped Britain's social and physical landscapes. Transportation, too, underwent a dramatic transformation. Previously isolated regions became interconnected through a growing network of canals, engineered with astonishing precision to carry heavy goods across long distances. Canals enabled coal, iron, textiles, and raw materials to move faster and cheaper, accelerating industrial growth. Yet even this innovation would soon be surpassed. The development of the steam locomotive and the railway system marked a turning point in British history. Railways slashed travel time, opened new markets, expanded cities, and forever altered people's perception of distance and possibility. Farmers could send produce to urban centers, manufacturers could distribute goods nationwide, and workers could travel farther for employment. Industrialization also sparked profound changes in agriculture. The enclosure movement consolidated small plots into larger privately owned farms. Landowners introduced new methods, crop rotations, and scientific approaches to farming that increased productivity. But enclosure forced countless rural families from their land, pushing them toward the growing industrial towns. What was hardship for some became the foundation of Britain's new labor force. Cities experienced explosive growth as people crowded into tenements near factories, reshaping urban life. Life in industrial towns was harsh. Streets overflowed with waste, living quarters were cramped and often unsanitary, and clean water was scarce. Diseases spread easily in these densely packed neighborhoods. Many families lived in a single room. Children worked in factories, mills, and mines from an early age. Employers valued discipline and long hours, leaving workers with little time for rest or education. Yet despite the hardships, wages provided a level of economic independence previously unattainable for many rural laborers. The industrial city became a place of both struggle and opportunity, hardship and ambition. As cities expanded, so too did social divisions. A new industrial middle class emerged: factory owners, merchants, engineers, and skilled professionals who benefited from mechanized production. They built comfortable homes, invested in railways, and supported educational and civic institutions. Meanwhile, the working class bore the brunt of the Industrial Revolution's cost. Long hours, dangerous machinery, and unstable employment created widespread discontent. Workers began to form unions, demanding fair wages, safer conditions, and shorter hours. Early labor movements, though often suppressed, laid the foundation for future social reforms that would reshape industrial society. Technology continued advancing. Iron production, enhanced by innovations such as the puddling process and the use of coke instead of charcoal, allowed for stronger machinery, tools, and eventually the construction of massive structures like bridges and factories. The growth of the iron industry fed into railway expansion, which in turn drove demand for more iron. Industrial Britain became a self-reinforcing system of interconnected industries, each fueling the growth of the other. Education and literacy began to improve as industrialization created new expectations for skilled labor. Mechanized production required maintenance, engineering, accounting, and management. Schools slowly expanded, and technical institutions emerged to train a new generation of workers and innovators. Knowledge, once reserved for the elite, became increasingly accessible to the broader population. Britain's global influence grew enormously during this period. The demand for raw materials, such as cotton, metals, and food, linked British factories to distant regions across the globe. Colonies and trade partners served as both sources of materials and markets for finished products. Industrial Britain extended its reach through maritime power, financial networks, and commercial expansion. The British Empire became deeply intertwined with industrial growth, shaping the geopolitical landscape of the 19th century. By the end of this phase of the Industrial Revolution, Britain had become the world's leading industrial nation. Its factories produced goods on a scale unheard of in human history. Its cities swelled with workers, its transportation networks extended to every corner of the country, and its influence stretched across continents. But the transformation was not without cost. Environmental degradation increased as coal smoke filled the air, rivers became polluted, and natural landscapes gave way to industrial centers. The human toll, long working hours, dangerous labor, and poor living conditions raised questions that would fuel future reforms. The momentum of industrial progress was unstoppable. In the decades that followed, Britain would continue to innovate, expand, and influence global development. What began as a series of mechanical inventions had evolved into a comprehensive restructuring of society, economy, and daily life. The changes set in motion during this era would define modern civilization, shaping everything from urban planning to international trade. Part 2 captures the rapid expansion of industry, the rise of mechanized production, the growth of cities, and the complex interplay of innovation, labor, and social change. The forces unleashed during this transformative period would continue to influence Britain and the world for generations to come. Urban Britain transforms at a speed no previous civilization has witnessed. Towns once defined by weekly markets and modest workshops now expand outward in every direction, filling with brick housing blocks, iron bridges, gaslit streets, and factories whose chimneys dominate the skyline. Populations surge as migrants arrive from rural counties, Scotland, Ireland, and later from across Europe, seeking work in the booming industrial towns. Cities like Manchester grow from small weaving centres into massive industrial complexes. Birmingham becomes the workshop of the world. Liverpool emerges as a global trading hub, its docks connecting British manufacturing to every continent. This rapid urbanization brings opportunity, but also congestion, pollution, and extreme overcrowding. Entire families live in single-room dwellings, often without sanitation. Diseases spread quickly, and life expectancy in industrial towns declines sharply during the early decades of the transformation. Factories adopt a rhythm defined by machinery rather than natural daylight, turning human labor into a disciplined extension of industrial power. Factory whistles mark the beginning and end of shifts that stretch across 12 to 16 hours. Workers follow routines dictated by spinning frames, mechanical looms, and steam-powered machines. The pace is relentless. Children join this industrial workforce in large numbers, working under strict supervision, their small hands ideal for cleaning machine parts or reaching between threads. Women find employment in textile mills, contributing significantly to household incomes, yet earning far lower wages than men. The factory system redefines the structure of family life, as work and home separate sharply for the first time in British history. Domestic tasks compress into the limited hours between shifts, while meals, rest, and family interaction revolve around factory discipline. This restructuring of daily life becomes a defining characteristic of the Industrial Revolution. Industrial towns grow chaotic, often without planning or regulation. Housing is built quickly and cheaply to accommodate swelling populations. Streets flood during rainstorms, and waste accumulates in alleys. Water sources become contaminated, causing outbreaks of cholera and typhoid. Factories emit black smoke that coats buildings and lungs alike. Yet despite these hardships, workers continue arriving in growing numbers, attracted by the promise of wages far higher than rural labor could ever provide. The industrial economy offers both exploitation and opportunity, forcing workers to navigate a complex landscape where survival depends on endurance, adaptation, and community support. Over time, social networks emerge within working-class districts, creating the roots of a new urban culture defined by resilience. As industry expands, Britain's global reach deepens. Raw cotton from American plantations, fueled by enslaved labor, flows into Liverpool's ports. Wool from Australia and India arrives in vast quantities. Iron, coal, machinery, and textiles produced in British factories circulate worldwide, generating profits that fuel further expansion. These global connections strengthen Britain's economic dominance, but are also built upon exploitation, inequality, and colonial extraction. British merchants and industrialists profit enormously from overseas markets, while workers at home struggle with rising costs of living and poor living conditions. This contrast reflects the unequal distribution of wealth produced by industrialization, shaping class divides that grow sharper as the century progresses. Coal remains the foundation of Britain's industrial might. Mines deepen, becoming labyrinthine networks beneath the countryside. Miners work under brutal conditions, darkness illuminated by weak lamps, water pooling underfoot, risks of collapse and explosion ever present. The demand for coal increases as factories, steamships, and locomotives rely on it. Regions like South Wales, Yorkshire, and Northumberland turn into mining landscapes where entire communities depend on the mines for their livelihood. These mining communities develop strong cultural identities, but also face economic vulnerability when seams run dry or demand fluctuates. The coal industry becomes symbolic of both British strength and British struggle during industrialization. Transportation networks evolve dramatically. Canals, once the lifeline of industry, begin giving way to railways. The speed and efficiency of steam-powered locomotives shock the world. The Liverpool and Manchester Railway becomes a symbol of technological progress, reducing travel time drastically and transforming the movement of goods and people. Rails spread rapidly across the nation, connecting industrial towns with ports and rural areas. Railways reshape landscapes, economies, and time itself. People travel farther for work. Goods reach markets instantly compared to old methods, and newspapers spread ideas with unprecedented speed. Britain becomes the most interconnected society on Earth, setting a model for future industrial nations. Capital investment fuels rapid industrial expansion. Banks grow in number and power as they finance factories, railways, and imperial trade. Joint stock companies proliferate, allowing large industrial projects to attract investors on an unprecedented scale. The concept of modern capitalism crystallizes in this period, with speculation, profit-driven financing, and risk-taking becoming central components of the economic system. Entrepreneurs rise to prominence, celebrated for their innovation, but often criticized for their treatment of workers. The wealth gap widens sharply, with industrialists building large estates while laborers struggle for survival. This disparity fuels political debates that will shape British society for decades. Intellectual and scientific progress accompanies industrial growth. Engineers refine machinery, chemists experiment with dyes and materials, and inventors push the boundaries of efficiency. The demand for technical knowledge inspires the creation of new educational institutions, libraries, and scientific societies. Britain becomes a global center of engineering and innovation. The desire to improve production processes leads to significant leaps in metallurgy, steam efficiency, and mechanical design. The combination of practical experimentation and scientific understanding becomes a hallmark of the era, driving innovation across industries. But industrialization also sparks resistance. Workers organize to demand fair wages, safer conditions, and shorter hours. Early labor movements face harsh repression, yet they persevere. Strikes, petitions, and collective bargaining slowly reshape the balance of power between workers and employers. Legislation gradually improves working conditions, limiting child labor and establishing basic safety standards. These victories do not come easily. They are the result of decades of struggle. The rise of unions marks a turning point, giving workers a political voice and establishing foundations for modern labor rights. Factories continued to rise across Britain, reshaping the geography of the country. Rural landscapes were replaced by industrial skylines, smokestacks, and mechanized noise. The speed of production increased beyond anything the world had seen before. Britain's iron output surged, textile mills expanded into massive industrial complexes, and steam-powered machinery became the foundation of a new global economy. As these industries matured, the nation entered a period of unparalleled influence, exporting not just goods but industrial knowledge that would soon transform continents. Urbanization accelerated at an overwhelming rate. Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, Glasgow, and Liverpool evolved from modest towns into industrial giants. Populations multiplied within decades, driven by migrants seeking factory work. Streets grew crowded, tenements expanded upward, and entire districts emerged around mills, mines, and rail hubs. The population density created new economic opportunities, but also exposed weaknesses in sanitation, housing, and public health. Diseases such as cholera, smallpox, and typhus spread rapidly in cramped neighborhoods where clean water was scarce and sewer systems were non-existent. Workers adapted to the new industrial lifestyle, but the transition was harsh. The factory clock dictated daily life, replacing centuries of agricultural rhythms. 12 to 16-hour shifts, dangerous machines, and poor ventilation pushed bodies to their limits. Women and children often filled the most hazardous positions because they were cheaper to employ. Supervisors enforced strict discipline to maximize productivity. Despite these conditions, the factory wage provided steady income in a world where agricultural uncertainty had long dominated survival. This steady income created a new working class identity, industrial, urban, and increasingly conscious of its strength. Reform movements began to emerge. Social activists, religious leaders, and political thinkers documented the brutal realities of industrial cities. Public campaigns highlighted child labor abuses, dangerous machinery, and overcrowded housing. Parliament slowly responded with factory acts that limited working hours and set safety standards. Although early reforms were modest, they marked a turning point, the recognition that industrial progress required social responsibility. The working class gained visibility, voice, and eventually political power. Education systems evolved to support the new economy. Formal schooling expanded for children, designed to create literate, disciplined, and skilled citizens capable of operating machinery and supporting industrial growth. Technical schools emerged, training engineers and mechanics in the principles of steam power, metallurgy, and mechanics. Scientific societies flourished, encouraging experiments, innovation, and the sharing of industrial knowledge. This new intellectual environment connected inventors, industrialists, policymakers, and workers in a shared pursuit of technological advancement. Britain's global dominance grew. The Industrial Revolution allowed Britain to produce goods at unprecedented scale and cost efficiency. Textiles, coal, iron, steel, and manufactured goods flooded markets worldwide. British ships, powered by steam, transported cargo across oceans with unmatched speed and reliability. Colonial expansion intensified as Britain sought raw materials, labor, and markets for its products. India supplied cotton, Africa provided minerals, the Caribbean delivered sugar, Canada and Australia offered timber, wheat, and wool. Britain's industrial machine became the engine of a vast empire. Railways became the arteries of the industrial world. Tracks stretched across Britain, linking ports, factories, mines, and cities into a unified national economy. The speed of rail transport revolutionized trade, travel, news distribution, and military logistics. Global adoption of railway technology followed as engineers exported British expertise to America, Europe, and Asia. The spread of rail systems reshaped global commerce, enabling mass distribution of goods and unprecedented economic integration. Industrial capitalism emerged as a dominant economic system. Entrepreneurs who mastered factory production accumulated immense wealth. Banks expanded their role, financing new industries, railroads, and international trade. Insurance companies grew to protect businesses from risk. Stock markets became central to raising capital. This new economic structure did not merely support industrialization, it institutionalized it, making innovation, expansion, and competition inseparable from economic growth. Class divisions became more pronounced. Industrialists and factory owners formed a wealthy elite, shaping politics, investment, and urban planning. The middle class, engineers, merchants, clerks, managers, grew rapidly, becoming a stabilizing force in society. The working class expanded in numbers and consciousness, forming unions and advocating for rights. This social restructuring created tensions but also dynamism, driving reforms that shaped modern democratic societies. Global patterns of labor changed dramatically. Millions migrated across continents seeking industrial work. Irish migrants settled in Britain's industrial centers. Europeans sailed to America. Asian laborers traveled through imperial networks. These movements created multicultural industrial societies, but also introduced new conflicts and challenges. Nevertheless, global migration accelerated industrial growth and expanded economic networks. Innovation continued to evolve. Steam power paved the way for new technologies in chemicals, steel production, and engineering. Telecommunication advances, such as the telegraph, shortened communication time from weeks to minutes. Bridges, tunnels, and urban infrastructure expanded human capability. The cumulative effect was a wave of secondary innovations that built upon the foundation established by early industrial pioneers. Environmental consequences escalated. Coal consumption filled cities with smog. Rivers became polluted with industrial waste. Forests shrank as mining, railroad construction, and urban expansion accelerated. The impact on air, water, and land created long-term environmental challenges that future generations would have to confront. Yet at the time, industrial growth overshadowed ecological concerns, seen as the price of progress. By the late 19th century, the British Industrial Revolution had transformed the world. It redefined how people worked, lived, traveled, and communicated. It reshaped global power structures, enabling Britain to dominate international trade, finance, and politics. It accelerated scientific discovery and technological innovation, laying the foundation for the modern industrial economy. The model pioneered in Britain, spread across Europe, North America, and eventually the entire world. Factories became symbols of national strength, railways became pathways to development, industrial knowledge became the most valuable resource a nation could possess. Early adoption of industrialization positioned it as the architect of a new global era, an era defined not by agriculture or empire alone, but by machinery, energy, production, and technological progress. The Industrial Revolution's legacy remains visible today in every aspect of modern life. Urban living, consumer culture, mass production, global trade, corporate capitalism, public education, technological innovation, and social reform all trace roots to that transformative period. It reshaped humanity's relationship with work, nature, technology, and each other. Britain's revolution did not merely change a nation, it changed civilization itself.